Hi, everyone. We've set up this Being an Engineer podcast as an industry knowledge repository, if you will. We hope it'll be a tool where engineers can learn about and connect with other companies, technologies, people, resources, and opportunities. So make some connections and enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we have another very special guest, Jeff Gothelf. Jeff helps organizations build better products and executives build the cultures that build better products. He's the co-author of the award-winning book, Learn UX, and the Harvard Business Review Press book, Sense and Respond. Starting off as a software designer, Jeff now works as a coach, consulting and keynote speaker, helping companies bridge the gap between business agility, digital transformation, product management, and human-centered design. Most recently, Jeff co-founded Sense and Respond Press, a publishing house for practical business books for busy executives, some of you listening now. His most recent book, Forever Employable, which we're going to discuss in depth, was published in June 2020. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Raphael.
Well, I need to start out, this is my personality and the thing that interested me the most when I found out about you. You have a book called Forever Employable, and the link will be in the show notes before, How to Stop Looking for Work and Let Your Next Job Find You. Now, if that doesn't get your interest as a listener, I don't know what will. There's a lot of people out there looking for their next opportunity, and with the great resignation happening now, I'm very happy where I'm at right now, Pipeline. But for those of you listening, can you give us some golden nuggets of your book, Forever Employable?
Sure. The book is semi-autobiographical. So it starts off with my story and how I built the career that I have today, which is a writer, speaker, trainer, that type of thing, and consultant as well. And it really focuses on why I went down this particular path and why I think it's really important that other folks have this as a backup plan. Because, look, I do think the idea of company loyalty is dead. I do think that there's a tremendous opportunity for mobility in the job market itself. But the folks who really get the opportunities today are folks who have built up a reputation for themselves, folks who have leveraged their expertise and their experience and have begun to build a personal brand around them. And they're recognized for that experience and that expertise. And to me, that is the best resume that you can have. You know, Google me is the best resume that you can have, and really creating a relationship with an industry and a community by giving back generously to that community. And that's what the book is about. It's my story about how I did that, why I did that, kind of where the panic kind of came in that initially drove me to quit my full-time job or at least to start to transition out of full-time work into this basically forever employable, self-employed work. And then there are lots of other stories, lots of other case studies in there, and stories about celebrities and people you haven't heard of before who have done the same thing from all walks of life. So it's not just a tech thing. It's not just an engineering thing. It's an option for people in any industry.
Fantastic. I like how you gave me a concise response that I can work off of and ask you more questions about. So before I take any advice from anyone, this is something I'm sure is going to go through our listeners' heads. I want to know, what have they achieved in order to give that advice? Perfect example, before I ask a couple to give us, my wife and I, marriage advice, I want to see if they've been married for 20 years or something. So what have you achieved in your professional career that you're very proud about that makes you feel like you're qualified to give this kind of advice?
Well, I mean, look, I started down the same path as pretty much everybody else, the path that my parents told me to follow. And that path is, go to college, get a degree, get a job, work your way up the ladder, make, lateral moves and do that. And look, and that's fine. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with that particular path. But at some point it dawned on me, that this wasn't going to create the kind of stability that I was looking for, and this wasn't going to give me the kind of control that I wanted to have in my career. And so after a decade of working for other people, I began to take my expertise, the thing that I was learning at work, and I began to write about it. First in blog posts, and then in speeches at conferences, and then eventually as my first book. And all of those talks and all of those podcasts and all those speeches and everything in the book as well was me giving back to the community. It was me sharing my expertise and not asking for anything. Right? There was no call to action at the end of my blog post other than, read next week's blog post. That was about it. There's no call to action in the book as well. The first book, Lean UX, it just really is about, here's how we solved a particular problem and we think it might help you. And what that did is it built a reputation for me as someone who has had experience doing initially design work, product management work, digital product development work, and then as someone who had solved specific problems in that space, and as someone who was willing to share that expertise with everybody else. And that's really where things begin to change. That's where the opportunities really begin to come in, is the opportunities start to push you towards, the opportunities start to initially to speak, to be a guest, to share your expertise in other venues. And then eventually it's, hey, can you write a book? Hey, can you teach a class? Hey, can you do some consulting? Hey, can you help? Do you want, would you consider working for us? All those things begin to come in over time because you've developed that reputation. And I've done all of those things. And that's exactly what Forever Employable is about, is sharing that journey.
Fantastic. I also want to add to the listeners that Jeff has a 4.5-star review and 269 ratings on his book on Amazon. That's pretty cool. We're going to talk about the book, how you got those ratings later. Well, why not now? Like, how did you get 269 ratings?
I asked for them. I mean, really, I know that sounds basic, but that's literally, it's how you get it, right? Unless you've got a massive marketing campaign or you're already a well-known author, the only way to get these reviews is to ask for them. I mean, I literally, every single person that I put a book in their hands, if there was somebody who literally got a book from me physically, I asked, please write a review. If I sent somebody an email in my email signature, hey, did you read my book? Please write a review. If somebody emailed me and said, hey, Jeff, I read your book. I really liked it. I have a question. I would answer the question. I'd say, listen, thanks so much for that. Here's your answer. Please, do you mind writing a review? It's really, that's how I did it, is I asked for every single one of those. And it's amazing. People will actually do if you ask them. It's pretty cool.
How do you find the balance of not being too pushy when making the ask? Do you just make it once and leave it alone, or do you follow up on it?
With this kind of ask, I only do it once, right? This is one of those things where it's like, look, I'd love for you to help me. Usually it's right after I've helped them, right? I've answered a question, or I've given them a copy of the book, or I've signed something, or whatever, right? They've been to a talk, that type of thing. And so then it's a one-time ask, right? Hey, would you please write a review of the book? But look, I mean, but that's sort of the direct one-on-one request. I mean, when it's a one-to-many request, like on LinkedIn or in my newsletter or on Twitter, then that was a fairly regular request on there, because it was one-to-many, so I didn't feel too badly. But for a small ask like this, something fairly transactional, one-to-one, I ask once and that's it. Like, if they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it, right? This isn't a thing that I'm going to lose reputation points over, right? I'm not going to harass somebody to write a review of the book.
Absolutely. So let's see. So many things I want to ask you. Okay. The cover of your book is the sign of infinity. A pencil twisted in the sign of infinity, almost like a pretzel. Of the engineers listening, you know what the sign of infinity looks like. And the point of the pencil touching the eraser. What's the logic behind that?
I think it's just an opportunity to close the loop there, right? Is the fact that it is really an infinite loop, and that by following the advice in the book, you can become infinitely employable, right? The idea here in the book is to create a safety net. It's to create a continuous stream of inbound opportunities so that when the next pandemic happens, when your boss gets tired of you one day, when, your company gets acquired and all of a sudden you're made redundant, or who knows, right? Maybe your company goes out of business. Maybe Elon Musk buys your company, right? Who knows? All kinds of stuff could happen, right? There are two ways to deal with that. One is to be reactive and say, oh crap, Elon Musk bought my company and now I'm redundant, so I better spruce up my resume and, dust off my LinkedIn profile and get to work looking for a job. Or you can be proactive. And proactive means you start to create this inbound flow of continuous opportunities so that when something like that happens, you're not scared, right? Hey, I can grab that speaking gig. That'll pay a little bit of money. Or, hey, I can write for this magazine, or I can start doing some consulting work or teach a class or, build a course or whatever it is. You've got a tremendous amount of opportunities where you're not caught flat-footed when these events that inevitably happen to you. They happen to everybody.
I see. What's something that you've taught people? You say you've done a lot of giving back, and thank you for that. That when you taught people this, they were particularly grateful and they went out of your way to thank you for this. Something that happened often, like a specific piece of advice.
Look, the most successful book I've written is Lean UX. It's ironically my first book. I've written 4 total books, and so far anyway. And Lean UX is a solution to a problem that every software development team in the world has, which is how do you combine good design practices with agile software engineering practices? And that is an issue that nearly every team in the world has. There's a reason why that book has been so successful. And in that book, we provide an answer, right? An answer based on experience. And people truly appreciate the advice in that book. There's a lot of, it's not that long of a book, and there's a lot of tactical stuff in there. But even if you boiled it down to 4, 5, 6 key points, people know those points at this point, and they're super grateful for the fact that this thing exists, that they could hand this to their boss and say, look, we want to work this way. This is what I'd like you to do for me. And that goes a really long way in seeing folks, in making folks successful. And that's usually when I hear from them, oh my God, we were struggling with this. We read your book. We put it into action and things are better now. And to me, that's the greatest compliment somebody could pay me, is that not only did they consume the thing that I made, but it actually worked for them. It actually made them more successful. And that's why I did it.
Geez, this may seem like a dumb question. I'm a little embarrassed to ask it, but obviously, what metric do you use to judge the success of your books? Because I'm comparing the Lean UX book, and it says it's got 45 ratings and the other one has 269. So what do you look at? What metric to assess the success?
So a couple things. So it's a fair question. Lean UX, the Lean UX you're looking at on Amazon right now is the 3rd edition of Lean UX, which came out late last year. So it doesn't surprise me that it has 45 reviews. Or only 45 in comparison to Forever Employable, simply because that book's been around for 10 years and there's other versions of it that have hundreds of reviews on them as well. The success of the book, you can measure in a few different ways. Obviously, sales. Sales is an easy metric. How many copies did you sell? And generally speaking, most books don't sell even 1,000 copies. So if you beat 1,000, you're doing better than most books. So well done there. Why you wrote the book helps determine other measures of success. So for example, if you wrote it to make money, then the revenue you generated off the book is important, right? Which doesn't necessarily equate to the number of books you sold, right? For example, Lean UX over the course of the last decade has sold about 100,000 copies, maybe even more.
100,000 copies. I imagine, what percentage of authors get to sell 100,000 copies or more? Not a lot,
Very
right?
Very few. And look, it's in 9 languages, right? But I published it with a traditional publisher, with O'Reilly. They're a technical publisher, right? So I don't make a lot of money on every sale of the book. I get a royalty check every month. It's enough to take my wife out to a nice dinner every month. And that's about it. It's nice. I'm not complaining about it, but I don't make a ton of money of that. Conversely, I self-published Forever Employable. right? So for every copy of Forever Employable that I sell, I literally make 10 times more money than for every copy of Lean UX, right? So you can measure success that way. For me, honestly, it's about impact on the communities that I write for, and the amount of feedback that I get that helps me believe or helps me understand whether or not I've had impact. And Lean UX is clearly successful by those standards. And Forever Employable too. I mean, look, Forever Employable has sold about 10,000 copies to date. And people reach out all the time saying how much it's helped them and how grateful they are for it. So impact goes a long way.
If you could give somebody advice that they're thinking, they have an expertise, they have somewhat of a network, and they're thinking about writing a book, but this is something that they've never done before. So what resource would you give them that could expedite their learning curve in how to write a book?
Oof, that's a great question. Look, there's infinite resources on this. So the best thing that I think you can do in this case, I mean, look, so a couple of resources. If you want a resource, the resource that I like a lot, there's a website called reedsy.com, REEDSY. And it's like it's a marketplace for authors, for people selling services to authors. And so you're going to find editors there, developmental editors, copy editors, book designers, cover designers, publishers, you name it, authors, writing coaches, all that kind of stuff, ghostwriters, all those things are there. That's a good resource because you'll find a lot of resources about how to write a book there. But ultimately, if your goal is to write a book, my advice to you is just to start writing and not to write the manuscript so much, but to start to break it down into smaller tasks and start publishing those smaller tasks, like blog posts, 500 words, 1,000 words, right? Nothing bigger than that. And just start doing that on a regular basis, weekly, twice a week, every other day, something like that, where you're starting to get the writing muscle trained and you're getting content out there. For example, I'll give you an example. The book I'd like to write next is about a thing called Objectives and Key Results. It's a new goal-setting framework. Not new, but it's a goal-setting framework that is very popular these days, and I'm one of the leading voices about this. I have been writing a blog post about Objectives and Key Results once a week for the last 18 to 20 months. My blog posts are about 1,000 words, and so I've already written about 20,000 words for that book. Right? At some point, I'll put all that together and flesh it out and smooth it over. But this gives me an opportunity to write less, to write more often, and to get a sense from my audience which content actually resonates with them. Right? What did people read? What do people react to? And that helps me understand how to focus the book as well.
So I'm browsing through your website, and that's jeffgothelf.com. It'll be in the show notes. And I'm looking through your different blogs at the moment. I've heard a lot of people do blogs. I've done some blogs myself. After you write the blog, what can one do to start getting some traction on the blogs?
Well, you have to let people know that it's there. I mean, really, particularly if you're publishing on your own site, there's no algorithm to promote your work to anybody else, right? So you've got to let people know that you've published. And so you let them know on social media. I mean, and, wherever that lives for you. Twitter's big for me. LinkedIn is big for me. If you're using TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, right? Those are all viable channels as well. But really, wherever people listen to you or pay attention to you, or you have some followers, even if it's friends and family, start there. Let them know and ask them to help spread the word about it so that other people discover you. But you've got, and this, coming back to your question from before, this should not be a one-time ask. People will ignore this. You've got to hit them over the head with it over and over and over and over again until eventually they read it and eventually they share it and they tell their friends. So this is where you really double down on the requests.
Perfect. Real quick, I just want to take a short break and share with our listeners that teampipeline.us is where you can learn more about how we can help medical device and other product engineering or manufacturing teams develop turnkey equipment custom fixtures, and automated machines to characterize, inspect, assemble, manufacture, and perform verification testing on your devices. So we're here with our guest, Jeff Gothelf. And how did you get to 33,000 followers on LinkedIn? Any tips for some content creators listening?
I was creating content. I mean, look, I always joke with us. People are like, "Hey, Jeff, how did you build your following? How did you, get this client or to do that work or whatever it is?" I'm a one-trick pony, Raphael. I know how to do one thing, and that's content marketing, right? And it's not even that marketing so much. It's because there's no real, like I said, there's no real call to action. I write on a regular basis. I share. For me, that's the channel that works well for me. So on LinkedIn, I share content on a regular basis, and it's content that comes from my blog. It's not like I'm recreating new stuff every week. I'm repurposing content from other channels into LinkedIn, into Twitter, into YouTube, into whatever, into my newsletter. And so it's create once and publish infinitely, right? You just repurpose it, you chop it up, you edit it into the proper format for each channel. And so that's what builds an audience, because look, if you publish regularly, eventually something will hit. Eventually people will start paying attention. And that happens over time. Maybe it's 1 out of 10 the first time you start. But then once you have a couple of hits, then maybe it's 2 times out of 10 or 3 times out of 10 that something hits. And there's a compounding effect here where your popularity will grow the more you write. And it's just a matter of getting stuff out there and seeing what sticks. If you fret over how perfect it is or how polished it is or how good it is or how bad it is, you'll never get it done. You'll never build this. Just start shipping stuff out there.
Who's someone that did you call content marketing, what you said? Who's someone that does content marketing that you really admire and you strive, that just really does it well and you look up to in that regard?
So I think, there's some big names, right? So Gary Vaynerchuk, really impressive, right? You don't have to love his content, but the guy went from selling wine to running a massive marketing company through content. He made YouTube videos about wine, and he screamed into the ether for a year before anybody paid attention to him. He does a great job of taking one bit of content and repurposing it across a variety of channels, right? So again, you don't have to love his content, but his execution is brilliant. It's very, very good. So I think that's really impressive. Other folks who do a great job, is a colleague of mine named Melissa Perry. She's an expert in the product management space. She does a fantastic job of podcasting and writing and speaking and teaching and really taking her content and building a tremendous following and building a huge business on top of it as well. She's tremendously successful as well. And so I would encourage you to look at her for inspiration as well.
Melissa Perry, how do you spell her name?
Perri.
Perfect. I'll look her up later on LinkedIn. So you mentioned you create one bit of content and you chop it up, you redistribute it. Where do you first post the piece of content? Is it on your website?
So these days, yes, that's exactly where it starts. So I've developed, now people know me enough. Again, it's not a massive blog or success, but it's enough of a success that people know to come to my blog and read about it. So yes, so that's where it starts. It starts on the blog, and then it percolates out to Twitter. It percolates out to LinkedIn. Sometimes I'll make a YouTube video about it. I've got a very small, a nascent YouTube channel. And so that is, that's where it starts. But I definitely always start on my blog because that's a weekly ritual for me. I publish every Monday. There's a new blog post on there. And then based on how it works and how it succeeds, we decide kind of where to chop it up, how to repurpose it, where it's going to go from there.
So imagine you say you have a team that helps you with this?
I do. I have a team. That's right. So I do the writing, and then I've got the content. There's a content team that I work with who chop the stuff up, repurpose it, they schedule it for publication, and they really help me sort of create all these assets from the thing that I made. So I make one thing a week, and they make 10 things out of it every week.
A lot of it. Thank you so much for giving us these insights into what you do. This is already giving back and providing a lot of value for the listeners. let me think. Some of this is obviously innate talent, but how did you become a good writer?
I'd like to believe that these days I'm a good writer, but I wasn't always a good writer. Lean UX took me 4 tries to get published. I wrote that manuscript 4 times. And the reason why I wrote it 4 times is because I was bad at writing. I'd never written a book before, and no one taught me how to write a book. I'd written some blog posts, but that was about it. The way that I got good, or the way that I got better at writing, is by writing. And I know that sounds, again, simple and obvious, but that's the trick. There's really nothing. I mean, look, you can take some courses, or you can read some books, and there's lots of great, like, Twitter threads, lots of experts out there sharing lots of writing tips. And those are great. Those really help. But those are frameworks. Those are guidelines. Those are methods. Those are processes, but they're no substitution for you writing regularly. It's like working out, right? How do you get strong? You get strong by lifting weights, by working out, right? It's the same thing. You're exercising a muscle here. You get better at writing by writing. And then ideally, you work with someone who can give you really good critical feedback on your writing. I was very fortunate to work with my longtime co-author, business partner, and friend, Josh Seiden. Josh and I work really well together, and we've built up a long relationship of trust that allows us to be brutally honest with each other. When something's great, we call each other out on it, and when something is not great, we call each other out on it. And having that perspective is really, really helpful. So finding a writing partner, it's kind of like a running partner. You know, you don't even have to write together, right? You can write in parallel and then just read each other's stuff and provide critique. And that's really important, I think, is to get that objective point of view and to be able to take it, because, you know, someone's going to call your baby ugly, and you're going to have to deal with that. And that's okay, because that's how you get better.
Someone's going to call your baby ugly. That's funny. Let's see. Your partner, how did you find your writing partner?
Well, he and at this point he's my long-term business partner as well. We were doing similar work at different companies at the same time. So he was working on Wall Street. I was working somewhere else in New York at the time, and every time I ended up, and remember, I started doing some speaking gigs and that kind of thing. Every time I ended up on a panel or at a conference, particularly in New York or in San Francisco, I'd look to my left or my right, and Josh was always there. Every time. I was like, why is this guy always here? Like, every time I go somewhere, there's this guy. He's always there. It's really strange, right? And so we just started chatting to kind of get to know each other, because we were spending time on stage together. And it turned out that we had a lot in common, facing similar challenges, leading similar teams. And that really turned into a collaboration that has spanned more than 10 years, 12 years at this point.
Sorry for jumping around with my questions, but sometimes it's the nature of a good conversation. I just had it in the tip of my tongue. I'm about to ask you a question about this. How do you know when you're ready to write a book? Let me provide some context. A lot of people feel like they have the imposter syndrome, that they're not ready. Why them? How do you know when it's time for you to write a book?
I'm gonna tell you a quick story. I knew a guy once. I haven't talked to him in a long time. I mean, I still know him. I just haven't chatted with him in a while. He went to film school, and he told me the story. He said, the first day of film school, you go to university, you go to whatever film school 101 is, right? Whatever that first class is. It's one of those big amphitheater classes. There's 800 kids or 1,000 kids, you know. And the professor got up in front of the class, and he looked at all these kids, these aspiring filmmakers, and he said to them, do you want to make a movie, or do you want to have made a movie? And I thought that was just brilliant, right? Because it really challenges you to think about why you would even write a book. Like, do you actually have something to say that is book worthy? In other words, do you want to write a book? Or do you want the glory of having written a book, right? Do you want to have written a book? Do you want to have made a movie? And I think that's a really good first question to ask yourself, right? Do you really have something that's book worthy, something to share, something that you could write 30, 40,000 words about, maybe more? Right? Or do you just want to be able to say, well, I wrote a book? Because if it's the latter, you're probably not ready to write a book, right? But if it's the former, that's a good place to start. I think the next thing that you want to do is
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
I have to ask you, how do you know if you have something that's worthy to write a book about? Is it feedback from people?
Yeah, so that's where I'm headed, right? So initially, so first of all, like, that's the first thing. Like, how do you feel about it? Like, are you in it for the work, like to do the work, or are you in it for the glory? Right? I think if you're in it to do the work and to truly really think that you've got something that might be big, then the next thing is I'd say start running experiments, right? Instead of writing 30,000 words, write 1,000 words and publish it and see what happens and tell everybody. And then next week, write another 750 or 1,000 words and publish it and see what happens, right? And start to figure out how to tell your story, what channels it works for, what language resonates with your readers, who those readers are, why they're reading this, right? And I think if you can do that, if you can build that cadence of experimentation, you can start to sort of narrow down whether or not there's enough here for you to write a book about, and whether there's an audience for that book as well. And then most importantly, how to tell that story. And I think that's really important as well.
Perfect. Well, just coming here to the end of our conversation, and our audience may not know this, but Jeff has been living in Barcelona for 5 years. Is that correct? So I'm going to ask Jeff a question in Spanish, and I want the listeners, really going to put Jeff on the spot here, but in America, it's not common to have a native English speaker, an American, speak Spanish so well. So everyone listen to this. Bueno, Jeff, soy argentino y te voy a preguntar una pregunta en castellano o español. Quería saber si alguna vez has escribido algún blog en español.
Sí. Mira, la verdad, si miras en LinkedIn, hay al menos 5 o 6 artículos y videos también que he escrito en español. Y hace una semana enseñé una clase en español aquí en Barcelona. Fue muy, muy difícil, pero lo hice.
No, fantástico. Y ¿cuál es la diferencia, si hay alguna diferencia, entre la audiencia que habla español y la audiencia que habla inglés? ¿Alguna característica?
Mira, la verdad es, hay 10 veces, creo que es 10, no, 5 veces, 5 veces más palabras en inglés que en español. Por eso es más fácil expresar mis ideas y escribir mis ideas en inglés, porque puedo ser más específico que en español. Y cuando enseño en español o escribo en español, es difícil para mí decir las ideas como las tengo en mi cabeza, ¿vale?
Me imagino. So basically what I asked Jeff if he had ever written any blogs in Spanish, and he says yes, but not only that, he's taught classes in Spanish, which I think is pretty cool. But then this is my question. Jeff said that English has 5 times more words than Spanish. And I want to ask you, what does that mean, 5 times more words?
So there's about 100,000 words in Spanish, and there's about 500,000 words in English, roughly speaking.
What do you mean by number of words?
Literally the quantity of words. Like if you were to count how many words are in the language, right? There's about 100,000 words in Spanish, and there's about 500,000 in English.
Forget my skeptical back, and sorry to interrupt, but like, who comes up with that statistic? Real Academia
Española? Google? I've Googled it. That's where I got the data. I can't remember the exact source. But the difference is that you're able to express yourself much more specifically in English. I'm able to, I'm going to speak for myself. I am able to express myself. And granted, I'm still new to Spanish. But I'm able to express myself in English much more specifically, much more explicitly than I feel like I can do in Spanish. It's not to say that it can't be done in Spanish, but there's just so many more words. It feels like it's easier.
Geez, for some reason I have to challenge that a little bit. Let me ask you one specific question. What's a phrase or a word that it's available in English that isn't in Spanish?
No, that's fair. So let's take a word like raro.
Raro,
right?
Okay.
Raro. Raro means weird. It also means rare.
Exactly.
Right? Right? But you wouldn't say, so for example, in Spanish, and it's just the first one that came to mind, right? So it's just an example where in English you would say something is rare or something is weird. Those aren't the same things, right? That word, those two words mean something different in English, but in Spanish you'd use the same word for that. Esperar is another example, right? To hope or to wait, right? Now similar, like you're kind of hoping and you're kind of waiting, but in English you've got two different words for that. And so it just feels like there's just more division in English. But again, that's just two examples that come to mind right off the bat. I don't know if that helps my case or not, but
I came to the United States when I was 13 and I'm 31 now, so I'm like half and half bilingual. And I think that there's truth to this statement, but it's going to marinate in my mind even after this call is over. Yeah, I'm going to think about this. Well, what's something that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you want to share with our audience?
I think, what should you have asked me? You should have asked me, I don't know. You should have asked me about, how the pandemic has changed my career.
I'm thinking, do we want to talk about the pandemic? Are people fed up with the pandemic? Did you have some insights that people may not have heard elsewhere about the pandemic?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, look, I'll keep it short, right? We don't have to talk about the pandemic, but I can tell you about the changes themselves. The fact is, I don't travel anymore, which has been tremendous. I used to travel every week for work, and it's allowed me to completely reinvent my services as a kind of from at-home delivery. And that's fundamentally improved my personal life. I get to be home. I get to see my kids, see my wife, hang out with my friends, build routines, which is something I really missed before travel stopped. And now that travel's coming back, I'm not rushing to get back on airplanes. I'm really happy just being home, and that's been transformational for me for the last couple of years.
Exactly, because if you go to jeffgothelf.com, your website, if you scroll about a third down, it says work with Jeff, remote coaching, training, and keynote, learn more. So the keyword is remote in the beginning. How do you handle the inquiries that want you to fly out to places? Do you simply just say no, or how do you present the remote to them?
Well, so there haven't been that many inquiries to do that recently, although that, to be fair, a couple have started coming in. So they're starting to roll in again. These days, generally speaking, the answer is no, unless, honestly, and there's no real formula to this, other than it's a place I want to go, or a place I haven't been, or the work sounds interesting, or maybe there's somebody in that city that I haven't seen in a long time that I want to go see, a friend or a family member. I'll give you an example. Recently, I got an inbound inquiry for an on-site workshop in Estonia. I've never been to Estonia. I'd like to go. I hear it's awesome. And so I'm considering it, right? Because it's not that far, right? It's 2.5, 3-hour flight for me. And I've never been. Sounds interesting. And so maybe I'll go to Estonia. But that's the consideration. The consideration is like, do I want to go? Is it a cool place? That type of thing,
Fantastico. Well, any last words of inspiration for our listeners before we go?
The inspiration is, look, if you've got a burning passion, if you've got, not even passion, you've got expertise in your work, you got experience in your work, start sharing it. Be generous. Give back. It doesn't matter. Even if you feel like you should be paid for that, do it anyway. People will thank you. People will remember you. And when it's time for them to need something in that discipline, they'll come to you because they'll remember you as the generous person that gave them something without asking for anything in return.
That's amazing. It's been a treat having you on the podcast. Thank you, Jeff.
My pleasure, Raphael. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm Aaron Monker, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines, and with product design, visit us at teampipeline.us. Thanks for listening.